This was my phone before Call Joy. This is my
13 white men
That's
last
true.
time. Now 7 people that are far more reflective of both America and the Democratic caucus.
Yeah, and it is different from then, and it's going to be a different look than what we expect to see out of President Trump's legal team, the people who will be representing him, giving for the first time to Congress his official defense. We think we know, there's no official word, but we think we know the 4 attorneys who were a mix of White House attorneys and President Trump's personal legal counsel who are going to be representing him. They are all white men. And so that will be a little bit on display, which I'm sure Pelosi took into account whenever she picked her team to be her, essentially the House's legal team in the Senate for this process.
Lillian, how different is this, or how similar is this to the trial of Andrew Johnson?
So, well, I mean, that took place about 150 years ago. So it would seem like there should be a ton of differences, right? I think what's similar, that's important to keep in mind, is obviously we've seen these impeachments happen at very divided times in the country, very partisan times. Andrew Johnson was the president after Lincoln while the country had been wrenched apart by civil war and was trying to find its way back together. So obviously, you know, the most partisan environment we've ever seen in this country. I think, you know, another thing that is similar is that in all of these impeachment trials, we've seen that prior to impeachment, there was already a really strained relationship between the Congress and the president. Impeachment trials that we've had in the United States are inherently political. And in all of these, we've seen that there's already been this sort of push and pull and frustration between the 2 branches of government before we even get to an impeachment proceeding.
Okay, so Clinton trial in the age of Twitter. I mean, you know, one thing that we hear about for the Clinton impeachment process is that he was really trying to show that he was engaged in other things, that he was sort of above the fray as that was happening. Can you imagine, though, what the temptation would have been like if President Clinton had had Twitter at the time?
Yeah, I mean, well, I think one thing that's actually really interesting to note is that Clinton's approval rating, job approval rating, actually went up during the impeachment trial. Would that have been the same if he had been taking to Twitter all the time? I'm not sure. I would say, though, actually, in some ways, I think Andrew Johnson is maybe a better proxy for what we might have seen, like an Andrew Johnson in the age of Twitter, because he did sort of his equivalent for the day, which is while he had all these tensions with Congress, he went out on this tour around the country. It was, you know, his form of social media at the time, and he went on this campaign called the Swing Around the Circle, where he basically just went town to town and railed on Congress, told voters to kick everyone in Congress out, you know, used very sort of rude and derogatory language about how incompetent they were. So we have seen, even before, you know, the rise of a Twitter presidency, we've seen presidents before sort of figure out ways that they can get in front of the American public and, you know, convey their disapproval of how another branch of government is doing its job.
Natalie, the question of President Trump and how he uses Twitter is one that I think has Republicans a little nervous, maybe some excited, but it definitely has some in the Senate a little nervous because they would prefer sort of the staffers and folks that I've heard from in the Senate for him to just keep quiet and let them do their job and like get this done, since at this point, given the numbers that JM was crunching for us, it's like a foregone conclusion unless something dramatic happens that the president will be acquitted over here in the Senate. So there's a question of you know, whether President Trump will be able to control himself as he watches this process. I do see Senator Sanders there talking to reporters. Let's see if we can get some audio of that.
In withholding military aid to a foreign country. In other words, in demanding an investigation from that country. So we're at a moment where we have allegations that a president is using a foreign country to undermine American democracy. That is a very, very serious charge. That is what we can, and in my view, must focus on today. Thanks very much.
Senator Sanders talking to reporters there in that sort of underground area of the Senate. One question has been, how will the senators running for president be able to still connect with voters? And Natalie, our reporters who are in places like Iowa and New Hampshire talk about how politics is really nationalized right now. Like the voters are engaged in what's happening on the national stage. It's not necessarily the sort of the parochial issues that they're watching exclusively. And so it will be moments like this where the senators can come to the microphones and command the news cycle for even like a hot minute.
Yeah.
That will be to their advantage if they can.
Yeah, and you know, we do hear, have said multiple times today, I know already, that these senators who are running for president would much prefer to be in Iowa or in New Hampshire or wherever they think they need to be shoring up their presidential support. But I think it's a safe bet to say someone like Bernie Sanders, who already has a very settled national reputation, has a very big following, is probably less likely to lose out on that than someone like, say, Senator Amy Klobuchar, who's just barely hanging on to sort of the top half of the presidential candidate slate, who really needs a boost if she's going to stay in this race.
And that FaceTime and voter outreach would be very important.
Which is something that people in places like Iowa and New Hampshire,
Absolutely. They're used to it. They're
they
used to
expect
it. Absolutely.
They think they are in some ways owed it because they perennially get so much attention for before their presidential races, and I don't think anyone will set out to say, "Oh, they're not here. We can't, we can't support them now." But it really increments matter.
It's less about like punishing them intentionally. It's more about, oh, I was able to hear from Senator Amy Klobuchar last night, and she said this thing that really connected with me. And if they don't have that opportunity,
And there's ways around that.
chance,
You know, modern times now, you can get out on TV and you can connect with voters, but not if Senate rules require you to be in your chair, not communicating. Unlike President Trump, who may be in the Oval Office broadcasting his message however he pleases, Amy Klobuchar cannot be sitting there going on TV every
what if
few
just
minutes.
nationally everyone could just put down their phones for the time of just the trial and have like a an electronics timeout?
Yeah, I don't think our bosses are going to
Yeah, I don't
allow
think
us
we'd be
one
allowed
during
to.
this.
We'd be allowed to do that. Lillian, what's going? That description that Natalie has of like how these senators have to sit there and just listen and absorb and consume the information. It does feel like so